Welcome to the Sales Leaders Operating System, the podcast for sales leaders who know that success starts with strong leadership. Whether it's your first time leading a team or you're a seasoned pro, we've got the real-world advice you need to lead your team to greatness. Now, here's your host, Matt McDarby.
This is the second part of our conversation with Steve Gielda from Ignite Selling. Let's dive back into the conversation.
If I'm not getting the support I need to ask for it. But we'll connect something else you talked about earlier, which is the why. Sometimes even those senior most leaders need to be reminded why we need the help, why this was important in the first place, right? We all agree this is what we're trying to achieve. You're asking me to carry the full burden of this, but here's why I need more, right? So,
Matt, you know, in our organization, we're putting in these these quarterly business reviews with our clients, right? That QBR, one of the most important things of that quarterly business review with our clients is to remind them of the why. Okay. You said you needed help from an outside company to come in to help you achieve this outcome. Maybe it's a new product launch. You needed to see success of that by X millions of dollars in revenue by this particular timeline. Maybe it's because you have a new competitive threat coming into the marketplace. That's the why. So you decide to make this investment so that you can be successful in accomplishing this particular outcome. When we meet on a quarterly basis, we must remind them of that why. Remember, our objective here is to capture $11 million in the first 9 months of this product launch. Okay, we're 3 months into this. How are we doing? Let's take a look at some of the metrics that we put in place to ensure that we're not going to look back on month 8 and go, daggone it, we're not going to hit our number. No, we want to look at this every 3 months, remind them. The why is that we're trying to achieve this outcome because there's a new competitor coming in behind us next year that is going to be a lower cost solution provided to us. So we need to capture as much revenue as we possibly can in these next 9 months. So I think that when we constantly come back and remind them that, hey, this is the reasons why we're doing this, because we got a new competitive threat coming out. But we don't strike right now, we're going to find ourselves in a battle next year. We need to hit the market hard right now and stake our presence, stake our claim right now. And it'll be a good thing for everybody when we do this. But it's important to be reminded about that. And the lower down that you are in that frontline sales reps, you sometimes forget. So we need to kind of remind them all the way down. And we need to kind of say, hey, this is how we're doing so far. Let's celebrate our successes. We're doing great so far. Or you know what? We're a little bit behind. We've got a 9-month window here and we're a little bit behind. So what are those accountable things that I asked you to go do? I asked you to go meet with every client that's currently using product X and have that meeting where you can go talk to them about product A. Okay? How are we doing on that? You're doing well. You're not doing so well. What it used to be. But I think that's really important that we have those reviews kind of constantly going back to that why.
For those listening, at the end of this, if you've listened to any other episodes of the show, I'll do kind of a 3 or 4 minute summary of some of the key things we've heard from Steve in this case. But I'm going to jump in here and say we didn't stumble on it, but there was something that I want to point out, which is we started talking about in this conversation about the why, the outcome we're trying to achieve in the context of clarity and holding people accountable. Now we're talking about the why as a key means to get the support that we need to retain commitment and make sure that people are following through over time. So literally that means the why is a critical detail that we have to know early, right before at the start of the initiative, during the initiative, throughout, all the way to the end until we achieve that outcome. We can never lose sight of it because it's going to come up and we're going to need to sort of harken back to that outcome, that why, for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? That's kind of what we're saying. Good. Neat. All right, good.
I like to kind of highlight what you said there. It really sparked something in my head that, we do this learning alignment matrix. We simply say, what are the quantifiable goals you're trying to achieve? What are the quantifiable sales strategies you're trying to implement? If you really kind of move that back one more, if the sales goals are to increase revenues by 22%, grow margins by 7%, capture additional market share by 13%, whatever it might be, one question I've never asked is why. If you think a little bit about it, ask the question, of course, the kind of the quick answer from anybody is going to be, well, because that's what businesses do. Businesses need to grow to survive. Yeah, but help me understand. You came up with a very specific number of a 22% growth in revenue. You didn't say 6%. You didn't say 52%. You said 22%. Why?
Okay.
And I often don't ask that answer. I ask that question. In fact, I don't know if I've ever asked that question. But there is a why behind that. And that why could be that we have a new competitive threat coming out. And that 22% will help us hit the market share number that we need to fend off a lower cost competitor that's coming into the marketplace. That why is really important to understand.
Sure.
So, but I never really made that connection until you just kind of did that summary there, and I appreciate you doing that. And I think it's something that, we as an organization probably need to start thinking about.
And everyone listening needs to start thinking about it.
You're creating value for me. You're creating value for me.
Hey, I do my best. What can I say? But no, really thinking about the people who are listening to this, that not just from a frontline manager or a leader of leaders perspective, this gets to the heart of how we engage with our customers, how we differentiate, and the basis for the value that you're joking, I was creating value for you, but in the end, that's the basis for any value that we can create for anyone else, right? Do I understand ultimately what you're trying to achieve, not just from a measurable goal perspective, but what's behind it? What's the outcome you're going for and why? So, okay, good. Hey, and I will tell you for those listening, right, Steve, not just running Ignite Selling, has been a practitioner of this kind of value creation or value creating approach to selling. And he and I, though we've been doing this a long time, reflect regularly on our own approach and how can we help customers. But it's really important reminder, even for veterans of consultative selling, professional selling, that there are some critical questions we need to be asking. Now, we got here by talking about what does it take when you have to advocate for yourself internally or when you need to ask for top line support when it's not there. So a really great lesson with a lot of sort of layers and dimensions to it. So thanks for that. You've learned from some of the best in the world. You learned from Neil Rackham. You've learned from Dick Roof. People may not know, right? Like a long range of people. But I'm going to ask you to think about who has had the most influence on you and on your work. Could be anybody, a parent, a coach, a teammate, a customer, anybody. So who's had the most influence on your work? And then I'm going to ask you why. Why was it that person?
The answer used to be my father. And we all learn from our fathers. And I've learned a ton from my dad. He set the wheels in motion for the man that I am today. But as we grow up, there are other people that come into our life and force us to pivot or to look at something a little bit different that changes maybe the trajectory or at least how you might look at something. And for me, that was my high school basketball coach. I played basketball for Morgan Wootten at a high school called the Matha High School. And, one of the things that Coach Wootten really always instilled on us is this notion of personal ownership and integrity. And we think about this as in a professional world. Take that first thing, personal ownership. Personal ownership really is about kind of being the person that you want others to be. I mean, you want others to see, and without getting into my faith, it is an element of who I am today, shaped by my coach, because he did simply say the number one thing that we all need as people is to understand that God is important, and then family. And then he also said friends, then schoolwork, and then basketball. So out of those 5 things, he said, we need to have faith, but we also need to have our family and we need to have our friends in order for us to grow. And then we need to have our education, and then we need to have our fun in basketball. But personal accountability and personal integrity, those kinds of things really kind of forced me to kind of re-examine, am I being truthful to myself? If I want to achieve these specific outcomes, nobody's going to do it for me. there are certain things that I need to do in order to be successful in this area. And so he would start asking questions. What have you done lately to ensure that you're getting better at this? Now, Morgan Wootten was one of these guys that was all about practice. You wanted to get better at something, it came down to practice.
Yes.
Practice required personal accountability. Nobody's going to go out there and do it for you. And if one of the things I need to practice on was my foul line shot, okay, or my baseline shot, well, it's only going to get better with practice. And he would hold me accountable to it. He'd say, Steve, I didn't see you stand there doing that baseline shot. You told me one of the things you want to do was get better at your 11-foot jump. I haven't seen you down there doing that. You really want to get better at it, or are you just giving me lip service? So it comes down to, again, we talked about accountability, but it comes down to personal ownership too. If I want to get better at something, I need to commit to it, and I need to go do it. In the absence of being honest with yourself about something that you really want to go change, some behavior you want to improve, some behavior you want to fix, it comes down to that. So that's a long-winded answer, Matt. I apologize for the lengthy response, but I probably answered your second question as to why, maybe a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those listening, Morgan Wootten is a name that resonates with anybody in the DC metro area, but a point of comparison would be, if you know who John Wooden was for college basketball, Morgan Wootten may be the rough equivalent at the high school level. And so that means Steve has grew up under the tutelage of Morgan Wootten and Neil Rackham, two completely different walks of life, right? But not bad, not bad in terms of where you've learned, right? Good. We're going to, at the very end, before I get to my summary, I do want to hear a little bit more about there's an important part of who you are. I do want to ask you about Sleep in Heavenly Peace at the very end of this. And if you would give me a minute or two on that, because I know, people like Morgan Wootten would have influenced you to, give as much of your life as you have to important causes like that organization. So we'll come back to that. Great. No, I don't have any other questions about the why. I will latch on to one thing that I think is immediately relevant for the audience, which is the point you made about practice. So much of what I've observed in the best sales leaders over the last couple of decades, whether it's frontline leaders or people, leading entire sales organizations, is they create an environment where practice is encouraged. And to your point, they don't just give lip service to it, but they require that their teams make time for practice. What have you learned about great practice in the sales world? I'm curious. Knowing what Ignite does, very much a hands-on, immersive experience where sales teams are applying methods to real-world situations, real accounts, real opportunities, real calls. So I know what you do from that perspective. I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about, what have you seen the best organizations do with regard to practice specific? Any nuggets there?
I'll put it back over to the responsibility of that frontline sales manager. In my case, that is the basketball coach. We want to stick with that analogy. If you want your players to get better, they've got to practice. Uh-huh. And sometimes because they are these lone wolves out in the field, managing their own territories, they often don't practice with their peers as well or as often or as frequently as we want them to. Now, there is technology that allows that to happen nowadays. And I would encourage you to look into those types of technologies that allow your team to practice online and share videos and those kinds of things. But the nugget, I think, given the fact that this podcast is really designed for sales leaders, and we're talking about kind of this operational rhythm and operational systems, I think it's important that managers take on that accountability for their reps to get better. Be the coach. Force them to practice. Play one-on-one with them in several different scenarios. It can be the fundamental role plays of one-on-one. Matt, if you're my sales rep, I give you an objection and you have to figure out, I'm playing the role of the customer. How do you handle that objection? It could be, what questions are you going to ask if, in fact, I'm using this particular competitive product? Uh-huh. We can role play those things, but it doesn't have to be just that kind of practice. It can also be strategic practice. You can challenge them as the frontline sales manager by asking them questions that challenges their critical thinking. Let's face it, top sales representatives today know how to think critically and solve problems. You want to be a good coach? Challenge that muscle in them. Ask them questions such as, what makes you believe that this person is your strongest advocate? Who's your competition talking to that you're not? What's the decision criteria that this customer is using to compare us against the competition other than price? These are some fundamental questions that sales representatives often don't think about, but managers need to push. So take on that responsibility. Force them to practice critical thinking, force them to practice what they need to do when they're in front of the customer. Take on that responsibility, own it.
Yeah. There may be folks listening to this thinking, yeah, but, right? I get it. We should be practicing, but I don't have time to do it. I know it's important, but I can't make time for it. A big reason for why I talk so much about an operating rhythm and a cadence is so that you recognize that you as a leader, you control your time. Time isn't the enemy. Time is your most important asset. How you use it matters. So you have to choose to carve out time for practice. There's no yeah buts here, right? And if you look at your calendar right now as you're watching this, or listening to this conversation, I should say, if you look at your calendar and you don't see any time carved out for practice, or you don't know if and when your team is practicing, big opportunity, folks.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'll put it another way, that's a huge problem. You better solve it if the way that your company differentiates depends largely on how your people function in the field. They're not slowing down to think critically. To your point, they're not working that muscle, or you don't know when it's happening. Assume it's not happening at all, right? And that tends to go ahead.
And the real amazing thing that you've seen this more than I have, given your responsibilities and really kind of focusing on managers over the last, I'll say 5 decades you've been doing this. We want to give each other a hard time about age. No, but you've seen this more than I have, and that is managers. It's quick. We're quick to blame time, and I don't have time to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But if we just stop, it's not about finding more time in our day. It's about using our day differently. We all have one-on-one conversations with our sales representatives every single day. My question to managers when I'm working with them is, what have you done in that conversation that's going to help them become more successful independent of you? What questions did you ask them? How did you challenge them to look at something differently? What kind of practice did you do with them? It's not about needing more time. It's about using your time smarter. And sometimes it's just about the questions that you ask. Instead of just assuming what the sales rep has told you to be true, challenge their thinking or ask them the question, can we play that out a little bit? So if I am Mary and you're you, and I tell you this as Mary, how are you going to respond to that? Now, that doesn't take any more time than you telling the sales representative what they believe they should do. The downside is you telling them what they should do doesn't help you achieve your ultimate goal, which is having a sales team that is successful independent of you, because you're always doing it for them. So it's not about needing more time. It's about better utilizing our time when we're with our rep.
Right.
That'd be my advice.
We at the top of this conversation, I asked you a pretty specific question about the system, right? What have you observed? The best leaders that you know, what are the elements in their system? For those listening, I would challenge them to think about, are you thinking about your time in the context of that system? How do I make use of it? How does my system reflect in my calendar and how I apply time with my teams, right? In your example, if I have to invest time to be really clear with my teams about what we're trying to achieve, why it matters, how they need to go about it. And then I'm going to be really focused on gaining specific and time-bound commitments from people when I talk to them so I can hold them accountable to the things that they need to do. Then that's also got to be part of my rhythm, and my system has to support that, right? So we're throwing words around that I hope resonate with people, system, a rhythm, or cadence. The point is, leaders listening, you have control, to your point, over how you're using your time. Is practice part of the environment that you operate? And if it isn't, why not? It's kind of an easy thing to fix. You just have to commit to doing it, right? All right, last question, because it's been such a productive conversation. We're chopping this into 2 episodes here, right? But I'm going to ask you one last purposely vague, big open question, Steve, because I'm sure there's more we could learn from you in the time we have, but we only have a few minutes. What else? What else do we need to know about how great leaders operate? What else do we need to know about getting great results and transformations? Just what else have you not shared with us yet?
That is a very broad question. And we've talked about a lot of things, but I think that if you're a frontline sales leader today and you have a team of sales representatives that report up to you, I think that I would go back to maybe one of the last statements I made and just put a little bit more of a highlight on that. And that is, what have you done today with a rep that you talked to help them to be more successful independent of you? Now, can you answer that question? Did you go tell them to go do something? And by the way, telling them to go do something, we might want to believe or talk ourselves into the fact that that helps them become better. But I promise you, telling them, don't put your hand on that stove, isn't going to stop them from putting that hand on that stove if they're a real curious sales rep, okay? Putting them into a situation so they can experience what the heat on that stove is going to feel like without getting them hurt is where they're going to grow. So I think that it's important that we ask ourselves, and we're honest with it, what have I done today to help that particular sales rep or reps that I spoke to today to become more successful independent of me? If I'm doing those things daily, my friend, you are on the right path. Continue doing more of that, because one day you're going to sit and look back and go, my team's 120% of quota. You know how many sales I had to help close?
Yep.
None.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you don't have a job to do to continue to support them, answer questions, and continue to coach them along the way. But how many sales calls did you have to go in to close? Very few. Because you helped them grow to become successful independent of you.
Great.
That'd be my last.
Great. No, I love that. I think that's a great way to nearly close the conversation. But I did say that I wanted you to talk a little bit about another important part of your work here. For those listening, incidentally, if you look up Steve on LinkedIn, you can find his last name is Gielda. If you look at his profile on LinkedIn, you'll notice, in addition to his role at Ignite Selling, he's currently the president at the Austin, Texas chapter of an organization called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. Steve, tell us about that organization and maybe where people can learn more about it and help wherever they may be.
Well, Matt, thank you for kind of even asking me about that. It is an important mission in my life. And I think that we all have a responsibility to find ways to which we can improve our own community. You know, I believe firmly that, we're put on this earth to support each other. And, we have to figure out, where do we want to serve? How can we help others in our community? And Sleep in Heavenly Peace is a nonprofit organization that has 360 chapters across the United States. And we have one mission in mind, and that is that no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. That's what it's all about. And it's really unfortunate. It's a thing such as simple as a bed. You never really think about, are there people really sleeping on the floor? People don't have beds. Well, I can tell you right now, here in Austin, Texas, we have 884 applications, okay? Each application averages about 2.5 beds, okay? Just do some quick math here. You're quickly looking at an easily 2,500 kids needing beds right now. Right now, last night, they slept on the floor. I have a goal here in this year of 2024 to build and to deliver 500 beds. It's a hole that's never going to be filled. But we know that we can continue to do that, because it's not just giving those kids a bed with a brand new mattress and a brand new pillow and brand new bedding. By the way, those of you who have supported us through LinkedIn, I want to say thank you. You'll see me post things from time to time online. And it's amazing that business community, how many people will simply go, order some bedding. They'll click on the QR code and order some bedding, and it'll arrive at our warehouse. So, but we're not just giving these kids a bed, Matt. We're giving these kids a better night's sleep. That helps them become a better student, helps them become a better son, a better daughter, a better brother, a better sister, a better friend. So we're giving them a chance for tomorrow. It's not just a bed. And I mean, the smiles on these kids' faces and the appreciation from these parents. You walk into the house and you literally are seeing maybe one mattress on the floor with 2 kids sleeping on it. Maybe you'll see a couch in a living room, and you walk in there at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday to deliver 4 new beds into their house. And they're sleeping on the floor in one of the bedrooms, or they're sleeping on some blankets, or sleeping on a pillow, a throw pillow from the couch. When you walk in there and you're putting in 2 sets of bunk beds in one bedroom, and all of a sudden they're going, oh my gosh, this is my bed? Yeah, sweetheart, this is your bed. It's just, I get goosebumps thinking about it. So That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And you can find a chapter in your local community. As I said, there's 366 chapters, I think, in the United States today. You just go to, do a Google search on sleep and heavenly peace, and you'll find one in your area if you want to get involved.
Awesome.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you giving me that opportunity.
No problem. Yeah, I would encourage everybody listening to please go check out the organization, help however you can. Interesting to note, I think we just learned a little bit about the why behind Steve's work, right? It's not only driving better performance and effectiveness in sales organizations, it's being able to make an impact. And thanks, Steve, for all that you do for the community there in Austin, and for all that you do for the sales community that's listening to this conversation. So what I'm going to do now is, based on our conversations here, I'm going to offer a quick summary to the audience and challenge them to think about, hey, there are a few things we just learned from Steve. How do you translate this now into your work in your organization? Before I do that, I just want to say thank you for joining us, lending your brain power and your time. It was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it. Always good work with you, buddy.
We had to break the conversation with Steve Gielda into two parts because there were so many gems throughout. I'll summarize mostly what we just heard in the last bit, the second part of our conversation. This is fresh, and I'll call out some things that Steve said, and really I need to challenge you on how they apply for you and how they apply in your environment. When we picked up this part of the conversation, we were talking about keeping the focus on the why throughout the execution of a, in this case, a growth initiative, right? A sales performance improvement initiative. And that we really need to keep an eye on leading indicators that tell us how we're doing at achieving the outcome we wanted in the first place. I think that was a really important point that Steve made. He and I then talked about, okay, we know the outcome we want, but are we really clear about even the why behind that? We can say that we want growth of 22% or whatever number he used in his example, but why? What's the reason behind that goal? And those are questions we have to ask, not only for our own understanding, but to make sure that we're aligned with the thinking of our leaders, and that we can explain what's behind the goal to our teams. We shifted gears in the conversation. We talked a little bit about lessons learned and who Steve has learned from. And he talked specifically about his experience as a player under the famed high school basketball coach, Morgan Wootten. And Steve talked about personal ownership and integrity being one of the really key lessons he learned from Coach Wootten. Be the person you want others to see, right? Have things in the proper perspective or in the right order. Your priorities are God, family, friends, work. But one of the things I think I'm taking away that I think is directly relevant to you and your role as a frontline leader or as a leader of leaders is this idea that, I've got to really own what I've got to get better at. Nobody's going to do it for me. And ask yourself the question, what have you done lately to make sure you're getting better at X, where X is the thing that you really need to be more proficient at or even achieve mastery at to be a more effective leader, to help your team achieve what they need to achieve. Coach Wootten taught Steve that practice is the key. I think Steve has learned this lesson many, many times over and over and over again over the decades in the sales performance business. Same lesson I've learned. Practice is the key. And the thing that he added is, as a leader, I am responsible for practicing the things I need to improve. I need to own that. That's part of that personal ownership and integrity lesson that he learned. Coming full circle to how this all relates to this podcast, to the point of the show, if you're listening to this, I'm going to presume that's because you are working on some things that you want to learn from others. You want to practice some things that you need to get better at or just do more of. And so I applaud your effort. Thank you for listening to this episode. Now the big question is, what do you need to practice? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable to getting better in those areas? Or maybe it's just that one area where you feel like you need to improve. Maybe today you picked up something from Steve, or maybe you've heard in one of our prior 46 or 47 episodes something that you need to work on. So go do it. I want you to be encouraged to do it. In our next episode, we're going to talk to another very successful leader and learn some of the things that he's done over a long career in one of the best-known sales organizations in the world to be a more effective leader and coach. I hope you will join us for that episode. Tons to learn there. In the meantime, I'm Matt McDarby, host of the Sales Leaders Operating System podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye for now.